Good afternoon, everyone. And for those of you who are in Rome and Jerusalem, good evening. We are very, very delighted to welcome you to this John Paul II lecture on interfaith understanding. We do this in co-sponsorship with the John Paul II Center, and we are delighted to have the director of the center and the sponsors of the center and many of the alumni of the center on this call as well. I've taken off my mask. The order of the day is fairly straightforward. I am going to introduce my boss, the Chancellor of the Jewish Theological Seminary, and then she'll throw the ball back to me, and I will introduce our speaker of the day. When he has finished, the Cardinal, His Eminence, and I will engage in some back and forth. And we want to invite everyone to, if you have questions during his talk or during our colloquy afterward, please use your chat function to send in questions. I want to alert you that if we did this right, that's the only thing you can use your chat function for. So don't be chatting your friends, but send us questions about the topic at hand. I'm going to start now by introducing my colleague. I can't introduce her formally without saying that for the last 50 years, she has been a beloved friend as well. The Lehrman Research Professor of American Jewish History and the 8th Chancellor of the Jewish Theological Seminary, Professor Shuli Schwartz. Shuli.
Thank you so much, Bert. And just want to offer my own words of welcome to you, to all of you, to the Jewish Theological Seminary for this John Paul II annual lecture on interreligious understanding. For us, it's one of a series of events in our opening season, which celebrates our newly reimagined campus and offers the public the opportunity to explore the intellectual, artistic, and religious breadth of Jewish life. I thank you all for joining us. This annual lecture was initiated several years ago by the Russell Berry Foundation. I want to thank Angelica Berry, president of the foundation, for her visionary leadership in so many arenas, but especially as a champion of interreligious understanding. This lecture has been a key component in recent years of JTS'S efforts to promote interreligious understanding. The impulse towards such engagement has been close to the heart of JTS for over 70 years, thanks to the vision of one of my predecessors, Chancellor Louis Finkelstein. It is vital to my own vision as well, something I have championed over the years from my teaching and public speaking with Professor Mary Boyes from Union Theological Seminary across the street to my work on the Encyclopedia of Women and Religion in North America. Today, we are so fortunate to have with us as our speaker, His Eminence Wilton Cardinal Gregory, who, in addition to his many achievements and claims to fame, is the Catholic co-chair of the National Council of Synagogues, consultation for the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. To introduce him fully and moderate our program, I am delighted to turn this over to my dear colleague, as you heard, of 50 plus years, Rabbi Burton L. Vysotsky, Appelman Professor of Midrash and Interreligious Studies at the Jewish Theological Seminary, Louis Stein, Director of the Finkelstein Institute for Religious and Social Studies at JTS, and Director of the Milstein Center for Interreligious Dialogue. Professor Vysotsky has been a giant in interreligious relations for decades, and we are so grateful for his leadership.
Thank you, Chancellor Schwartz. And now that you've read all my titles, everybody out there knows that at JTS we get titles in lieu of salary. It's a very effective means of the budget. I have been alerted, and I'm looking to Chris to acknowledge that people out there do not have their videos on. Is that correct? Yes. You have neither video nor the ability to speak right now because we are about to introduce His Eminence the Cardinal Archbishop. Wilton Daniel Gregory is an American prelate of the Catholic Church. He is the Archbishop of Washington. Pope Francis elevated him to the rank of cardinal in November of 2020, and he is the first African-American cardinal. He was Archbishop of Atlanta from 2005 to 2019. He was the first Black president of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, what we call affectionately the USCCB. And when the USCCB, under his leadership, issued a charter for the protection of children and young people in response to the Roman Catholic sex abuse cases, and we are very grateful to you for that, Your Eminence. Perhaps the most important thing in Cardinal Gregory's biography is that he was born in Chicago, Illinois. That makes the two of us both Chicagoans, and we have bonded over that before. Archbishop Cardinal Gregory is the moderator, as Chancellor Schwartz said, of Jewish affairs for the USCCB. By virtue of being a cardinal archbishop, I think that that qualifies you for being called a prince of the church. But I do want to say, having lunched with you and known you now for a while, that you are also a prince of a human being, what we would call a real mensch. Cardinal Gregory, the screen is yours.
Thank you very, very much, Bert, and thank you all of my dear friends for this opportunity. It is good to be together today, even if only virtually, for this John Paul II lecture on interreligious understanding. I would like to thank Rabbi Burton Fisovsky for his kind invitation to be with you this afternoon or evening, depending on where you're participating in this program. I'm pleased to discuss the topic of the future of Catholic-Jewish relations, as I have been involved in Catholic-Jewish dialogue for several decades. I was previously the chairman of the Bishops' Committee on Ecumenical and Interreligious Affairs, and have twice served as the Catholic co-chair of the dialogue between the National Council of Synagogues and the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, including at present. In order properly to discuss possibilities for the future of Catholic-Jewish dialogue, we need briefly to remember the history of the dialogue, which has brought us to this present moment. After discussing the past, we will briefly consider some aspects of the present status of Catholic-Jewish dialogue in the United States of America. And that will help us to discern where our relationships might progress in our common future. On June 13th, 1960, the French historian Jules Isaac, a survivor of the Holocaust, came to Pope St. John XXIII with the deeply held conviction that anti-Semitism is not consistent with genuine Christian faith. Pope St. John XXIII, especially in light of his experiences in diplomacy in both Bulgaria and in Istanbul, committed himself to purging the Catholic Church of the teaching of contempt. We can celebrate the fourth chapter of Nostra Aetate, which discusses the Catholic Church's relationship with the Jewish people. Nostra Aetate is particularly important because it was written and approved by all Catholic bishops and Pope St. Paul VI on October 28, 1965, during the Second Vatican Council. Among other things, this chapter explicitly condemns hatred, persecutions, displays of anti-Semitism directed against Jews at any time and in any place. Chapter 4 of Nostra Aetate discusses, among many other aspects of the church's current understanding of its relationship with Jews and Judaism, and it is too broad to discuss here in detail, except to say that this chapter can be seen as the fruit of Pope St. John the 23rd's efforts. Yet that was just the beginning. Popes St. Paul VI, Pope St. John Paul II, Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI, and our current Holy Father, Pope Francis, have all carried on the work that was begun at the Second Vatican Council. All of these popes have visited Israel in the hopes of building the relationships further. Those visits were held in very high regard. 60 years later, we can celebrate just how far we have come. The fact that you have graciously invited me to speak today is another indication of this progress. There have also been documents published by various Jewish groups and individual Jewish scholars in recent years, such as Dabro Emet, to do the will of our Father in heaven, and Between Jerusalem and Rome. These documents have encouraged Catholics in our efforts to reach out in fraternity to the Jewish community, which we have received with great gratitude. Catholics are very thankful for the generous response that we have received from our Jewish brothers and sisters to our outreach. They are indications of how our efforts have, at times, been quite fruitful. Relationships that are new are rarely flawless, and indeed some mistakes have been made along the way. However, the Holy See's 1998 statement, "We Remember," a reflection on the Shoah, and the December 30th, 1993 recognition of the State of Israel by the Holy See are examples of how patient with each other can then lead to real progress. While the great beginnings of our dialogue occurred largely at the international level, I would like now to discuss some aspects of our present experiences of Catholic-Jewish dialogue in the United States as an example of how our relationship has grown since the promulgation of Nostra Aetate. In the United States, which has the largest Jewish population outside of Israel, the relationship of the Catholic Church with our Jewish partners is very important. The American context of multiculturalism and religious pluralism also contributes to the need for people of any faith to want to know and want to work with their neighbors. Specific to the American context, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops has released a number of documents regarding various issues that have been the fruits of our dialogue. These include Catholic school teaching on the Shoah, depictions of the Passion of Christ, and presentation of Jews and Judaism in Catholic preaching. These documents are examples of how Catholic-Jewish dialogue in the American context has produced mutual understanding and friendship between Catholics and Jews. We can say that our dialogues have led to tangible results and have shown us ways in which we can know and appreciate each other more. In our decades of dialogue in this country, Catholics and Jews have come to know each other both as colleagues, but more importantly, as friends. Through many years of regular gatherings at the national, regional, and local levels, we have met through formal dialogues and conferences, prayer services, community service opportunities, and gatherings in churches and in synagogues. For example, in the ongoing dialogue of the National Council of Synagogues and the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, we have come to understand each other better and open productive lines of communication between our communities. This experience has allowed Catholics and Jews to be able to work together when expressions of intolerance have occurred, as we have sadly seen all too frequently in recent years. With the tragedies of the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, the Chabad of Poway, New Jersey, and the events of 2 months ago in Colleyville, Texas, we see that the need is greater than ever for solidarity between Catholics and Jews. In each circumstance, Catholics on the local and national levels expressed our support and solidarity with our Jewish brothers and sisters. In Colleyville, for example, the family of Rabbi Charlie Citron Walker, as well as emergency personnel and other local religious leaders, gathered at Good Shepherd Catholic Church to provide support and assistance for the rescue of the hostages. Bishop Michael Olson of the Catholic Diocese of Fort Worth called Rabbi Citron Walker's wife during this time to offer his support. These are only a sampling of some of the aspects of ongoing Catholic-Jewish dialogue in the United States. As for the future, there are at least 3 areas where we might be able to explore possibilities for the future in Catholic-Jewish dialogue. They are reaching the local level in our relationships, going outside of our relationships to serve the wider church, the wider world, and cultivating and including new participants in our dialogues. From the Catholic point of view, we have been able to develop, many times with the assistance of some representatives of the Jewish community, very solid documents about our relationship with Judaism since the promulgation of Nostra Aetate. While I will not list each one, the efforts of the Commission for Religious Relations with the Jews at the Holy See, as well as those developed by the Secretariat for Ecumenical and Interreligious Affairs at the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, in consultation with our Jewish dialogue partners, have helped to put into writing the fruit that has come from past dialogues. These have offered a great basis from which we can build strong bonds of friendship. Those of us who have participated in international and national dialogues are undoubtedly familiar with these documents. However, we must ask ourselves, how many Catholics and Jews actually know about these documents? How often are they referred to in our preaching? Are they studied in rabbinical schools, seminaries, and schools of theology? Most important of all, have they impacted our local congregations? The future needs to involve a reception of the teachings that have developed through our years of friendship, not just by the scholars and the theologians who collaborated on them, or our dialogues that discuss them, but also by Catholics and Jews in the pew, in society, and in their homes. It is my hope that the future will include a proclamation of the progress we have made together on the part of Catholics and Jews everywhere, not just those who formally participate in a dialogue. This would lead to deeper bonds of fraternity and solidarity within our local communities. When Catholics and Jews everywhere are able to view each other not as strangers, but as friends, we will have accomplished our goal. Another important aspect of the Catholic-Jewish relationship needs to be a willingness to go outside of our bilateral relationships to attempt to serve the wider church, the wider world, excuse me. Pope Francis, in the document on human fraternity, which he signed, as well as his encyclicals Fratelli Tutti and Laudato Si, have emphasized the need for our dialogical relationships to be of service to the wider world. For example, in the dialogue between the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops and the National Council of Synagogues, the participants have been addressing issues related to the alleviation of racial inequities and injustice. In fact, members of the dialogue are planning to visit locations of importance to the civil rights movement in the southern part of the country in the coming months as part of our dialogue. Looking together at issues that affect our wider world is a new, unique approach, as past rounds of this dialogue had mainly focused on issues that concerned Catholics and Jews and our relationships together. It is a sign of the level of maturity, confidence, and trust in the dialogue that its members are willing to take this step and examine issues that pertain to the wider world. Pope Francis encourages all of us, everyone, not just to remain insular, but rather to share our gifts with the wider community. We are discerning how to fulfill what we both view at times in our own unique ways, a divine mandate to enter into Tikkun Olam, or repair the world together. As we seek to go outside ourselves and serve the world with a common purpose, we will undoubtedly learn more about each other and grow closer together in the process. We have many, many objectives that both of our faiths hold dear, and working together towards a common goal that benefits humanity can only help to unite us. Catholics and Jews have certainly come a long way in how we see each other, how we talk about each other, and how we work together in the wider world. We need to make sure that we do not take our relationships for granted. As time moves on, we need to constantly renew and strengthen our relationships, as well as seek to draw more participants into Catholic Jewish dialogue at the national, regional, and local levels. Those who were pioneers in the dialogue decades ago have made great progress. But in order to have a future for our dialogues, we need to cultivate a desire among our younger people to want to enter into this dialogue, both formally and informally. We need to inculcate the importance of dialogue in our local communities, which will produce leaders for not only local, but also national dialogues as well. We need to form these new leaders who will carry on the work that has been done and the progress that has been made over these past few decades. As we move forward together, we also need to constantly sustain and renew our friendships so that we look upon each other not just as colleagues, but truly as friends who possess a level of trust in each other, as well as an interest in the challenges that the other faces. This view of the other only comes from time spent together, patient listening, and mutual respect for the other as other, genuine friendship and trust, and mutual support in difficult times. Inviting new young leaders to participate in the important work of Catholic Jewish dialogue will bring new energy and talent to continue to enrich our dialogues. We have already seen in the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Washington that Catholic and Jewish college students on our local campuses come together often for joint social gatherings, as well as opportunities for joint social activities. In contexts such as these, future leaders for Catholic-Jewish dialogue are cultivated and formed. To conclude, we look toward that future. As we look toward that future, we do so with great confidence that whatever comes, Catholics and Jews in the United States, and hopefully around the world, will be able to build upon the strong foundations that we have established in our dialogues over these past several decades. Our experiences together and knowledge of one another will allow us to approach the future as friends and not as strangers. My time with you today is one such example, and I am sure that there will be many, many more in the years to come. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
I want to thank you very, very much. I really can't express my gratitude. And I think looking around this room and knowing the average age of people on this call, I think it's important to point out that Cardinal Gregory and I are each old enough to remember what the world was like before Vatican II and before Nostra Aetate. We grew up in a city that's a very Catholic city, Chicago, and it wasn't always easy, frankly, for me to be a Jew there as a young kid, because Catholics didn't always behave well. And I suppose I should confess that Jews didn't always behave well either. It is nothing short of remarkable. I might even go so far as to invoke miraculous that the Church in Vatican II did a sea change in 2,000 years of theology. It can't be reckoned. We went first from millennia of enmity, actual hatred, to careful estrangement. And now Cardinal Gregory is calling us to take a further step, not just to be strangers or others, but to truly become friends. And I think that this is a very, very powerful call that I welcome personally. You mentioned that the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops engages with the National Council of Synagogues. The National Council of Synagogues consists of conservative, Reconstructionist, and Reform congregations around North America. And I am a member of the council, and I had the privilege a few months ago of being in Washington, D.C. with the USCCB, and Cardinal Gregory led us on a tour of the Museum of African American History. I want to say that it was a moving afternoon. It was particularly meaningful to see it standing next to an African American and to experience it through your eyes. I also want to say that it was the first time since the pandemic began that I actually ate in a closed room with a mask off. And I sat right next to Cardinal Gregory, and apparently came out okay. So there's something to be said for this Jewish Catholic dialogue. I am also exceptionally grateful that you have engaged in the conference, the USCCB and the National Council of Synagogues, in the upcoming tour, the Civil Rights Tour together, because this combines not only Jewish Catholic relations, but in both communities, our attention to our history of racism and our desire to have as much inclusion as possible. All that said, I want to qualify it, but before I qualify it, I also want to express my exceptional gratitude that we have His Holiness Pope Francis sitting in Rome. Pope Francis, when he was an archbishop in Buenos Aires, was a very good friend to the Jewish community. And before he became Pope, the one and only book he wrote was a book of dialogue with a local rabbi my friend Avi Skorka. And they have stayed in touch ever since he became Pope as well. I will not regale you with stories of Pope Francis and Avi Skorka. But I give you this by background because now I'm about to kvetch. I'm about to complain a little bit about some things of concern. Recently, in the last couple of months, the Pope gave a homily in which he discussed Paul's letters to the Galatians. And along the way, he seemed to indicate, perhaps explicating Paul, that the law no longer had efficacy. And that did not sit well on Jewish ears. We actually think the law still works, and it works for us, and it's still very much binding in our community. And if I'm not wrong, Nostra Aetate and some of the documents that followed it make that clear. Recently, in 2020, he issued the Fratelli Tutti, which you mentioned. And in the Fratelli Tutti, he brings forth a New Testament parable, the parable of the Good Samaritan. And I dare say, reading it at the time of Jesus is one thing, because it's an inner Jewish document. But reading it since the time of Jesus, and even now, one gets the impression that the Jews pass by the wounded man while the Samaritan takes care of him. And to be honest, Pope Francis's subsequent discussion didn't help it. So can you help us understand why it is that Pope Francis, with his love for the Jewish community and with the relations we have, why is it that such a, I'll call it a faux pas, can still occur?
You know, Bert, obviously, as I mentioned in my my presentation, in establishing or deepening a relationship, there are going to be errors, there are going to be mistakes on both parts of the people in the dialogue, or both of individuals. And we have to be sensitive to what is intended as well as what is received. So it's one of those things that, you know, obviously the Holy Father's longstanding and sincere and deep affection and relationship with the Jewish community, both in Buenos Aires and now on an international level, is a bedrock authorization. But occasionally, both Catholics and Jews can find ourselves saying something that we intend not to be offensive. Certainly, we have no desire for it to be offensive, but those who receive it are offended. And that's part of the ongoing challenge that we face. What do we intend has to be weighed against what is received. And then, of course, you and I were part of that dialogue, that conversation that touched on this very same issue when we were in Washington. And we both acknowledged that maybe some of the spokespersons who were trying to explain it didn't help the issue and may have inflamed it. So, you know, not only do we have to be aware of the intent of a statement or a position, but the reception of that statement or position, and those who interpret what was said or what was not said or what was intended. So it's part of the ongoing milieu that we live with as we try to deepen our relationships and make sure that there is an understanding of our affection and respect that is unassailable.
Your Eminence, I really appreciate your candor and your response here. I suggested at the time when I heard the Holy Father's interpretations of Galatians that it struck me, there's a phrase in the Talmud, it's called Girsa di Yankuta, the things you learn as a child. And the things you learn as a child are the ones that stick with you. I suspect that Pope Francis, when he was still Bergoglio, learned interpretations of Galatians that may not be entirely in concordance with Nostra Aetate. And without thinking about it, he erred by repeating what he had learned as a kid. And I, of course, not only am ready to forgive him, I'm ready to embrace him because he has embraced the Jewish community so well. I do want to turn to another aspect that you mentioned, and I'm getting some questions from the audience on my phone. You'll forgive me if I look at my phone. It's not that I'm bored, it's that I'm getting buzz, 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 lots of people asking questions. You talked about, yeah, I don't think you used this term, trickle down. How do we get the word out to the parishes? And I want to say that just this week, a colleague of mine in Milwaukee, a Jewish colleague of mine in Milwaukee, sent around to a group of us who are interfaith dialoguers a letter that the auxiliary bishop of Milwaukee, Jeffrey Haynes, I'm mentioning him by name because I want to praise his works. He sent a letter to his priests and his deacons, reminding them in the run-up to Easter during this Lenten season, that Easter can be a time that our rhetoric is fraught. And he literally included a link to Nostra Aetate, reminding people that if you talk about Easter and you talk about the crucifixion, you have to speak carefully, that we want good relations with the Jewish community. So I applaud that, and I wish that every bishop in every part of the United States and around the world could write such a letter to their priests, reminding them that it is in fact church doctrine that we now have different relations with the Jews than you might have learned as a kid.
Yeah, Bert, actually this very day, I sent a memo that has come out of the National Conference of Catholic Bishops from our Office for Ecumenism and Interreligious Relations that highlights that very issue. I sent it to my director of liturgy so that he could send it to all of our parishes. And it has that same link because we do forget. We forget as we get caught up in our religious celebrations, which are sacred and important and ancient, that we forget that some of the language and some of the references that we have taken for granted, you say that we learned as children, can be misunderstood, misconstrued, misapplied, and damage the valued relationships that we have been working so hard to strengthen with our Jewish colleagues. So that's out, you know, it's going to all of our priests and deacons. But I'm also glad that you cited the situation in Milwaukee, because what we need is that local leadership to step up. It's one thing for me, which I did, to send a memo from the Conference of Catholic Bishops. It's another thing for the local bishop to say, hey, we're getting ready to enter that sacred time of year, but that sacred time of year offers many opportunities to improve our relationships, not to further damage them.
God bless you, my friend. Since you're talking about local bishops and local efforts, I'm going to crow a little bit because at the Jewish Theological Seminary, we're bringing next week a group of our rabbinical students up to Dunwoody in Yonkers, New York, where our colleague, Bishop James Massa, who is the rector, is gathering a group of his Catholic seminarians. And our rabbinical students and the Catholic seminarians are going to engage in what I hope is going to be a fascinating dialogue. I know as I think about it, and probably as you think about it, you understand it's a bit mysterious. The topic is calling. What is it that made you decide to become a priest or a rabbi? And I will say to this day, 45 years after my ordination as a rabbi, people ask me that question. And sometimes I am stymied. I'm not quite sure. And I think my Catholic colleagues can perhaps do better because they can say, it's a mystery. It was the Holy Spirit. And maybe that should be my answer as well. But here we are, and I'm truly grateful that we are doing this. I'm going to circle back to our budding relations with the Dunwoody Seminary in a moment. Well, actually, let me jump in right now. you also talked about new participants in the conversation. And I have to say, and I say it as a critique of my own Cardinal Archbishop Timothy Dolan, and I said it to him personally, and he vowed he would do better, and I think he has been, that I think in America at least, before recent efforts of Pope Francis, the church has not been quick on doing outreach to Islam.
Yes.
And I have been engaged in that for a long time. And I think it's essential to the well-being of the Jewish community. Muslims and Jews in America certainly have a lot in common as minority religions. But I also think that there's so much good that can be done when Jews and Christians and Muslims work together to fulfill the word of the Lord. Again, next week, and again, with our friends from Dunwoody, we're doing a multi-faith iftar. The month of Ramadan begins this weekend, the holy month of Ramadan. Muslims fast from sunrise to sunset, and at the end of the day, they're hungry. So at the end of the day, we're going to feed them, and we're going to feed them at tables in this very room with Jews, with Catholics and Muslims together to break bread and to learn about one another. And I would love to hear from you. Are there more examples of that going on that you know in the church?
Yes, and I can say this and not claim any credit for it. At Marist Catholic High School in Atlanta, there has long been an opportunity for Catholic students, and I believe the Greenfield Jewish school in Atlanta, and one of the local mosques, they bring high school students together to spend a day, one day, well, 3 times a year, one day with the Catholic school students hosting, the next day with the Greenfield Hebrew school students hosting, and the third occasion for the Islamic students to host. And they go into each other's school and they sit around common tables. And as young people are inclined to do, they take off the masks. I know that reference in today's environment, but they take off the masks that they may have learned at home, which would shield them from seeing Islamic students or Jewish students as friends and colleagues. And they begin those conversations in each other's environments. And I think the Marist School and their colleagues deserve rich credit for providing that kind of opportunity, because it is my prayer that those youngsters, and now this program is many years old, those are young adults now, and none of them should be able ever to say, I've never had a conversation with a Jewish kid or a Muslim kid or a Catholic kid. And hopefully, you know, that was a good occasion. We enjoyed one another. We came to see each other as friends and hopefully build on that as they grow into adulthood.
I want to say a hearty amen, that when kids get together in particular, and as it were, remove the mask, they learn about each other very quickly. They learn about each other by who's wearing what clothing, by the manner of speech, by whether you slouch in your chair. And when Jews, Muslims, and Catholics get together in this way and befriend one another, these become friendships for life. You talked as well about the need to expand the dialogue in the wider world. And I want to commend the church. And I'm going to do that by way of commending, and he's going to join us in a little while at the end of the dialogue, my colleague, Adam Afterman. Adam Afterman is a professor at Tel Aviv University, and he is the director of the John Paul II Center. As director, he is a co-sponsor, in fact, of this conversation we're having. But the John Paul II Center has also been engaged with the Pontifical University of St. Thomas Aquinas for many years. Indeed, I have taught there, and indeed, many of the alumni of that program are on this call today. So we are reaching out to have a Catholic institution in Rome with professors teaching Jewish studies. That's almost unheard of. And it's quite amazing and wonderful. And I will say to my pride, the students who I taught in 2014, I remain close to. One of them actually works at the USCCB, and another one is about to be ordained a rabbi this year. So it's just a fabulous, fabulous thing. Not only is there this program at the Angelicum, as it's called, but there is also a program at the Pontifical Gregorian University among the Jesuits. And that program at the Cardinal Bea Institute, if you don't know who Cardinal Bea was, he was one of the cardinals absolutely principal in that fourth chapter of Nostra Aetate. He was virtually the author of that and made sure it got into the document. So he was a great friend of the Jews. And I have had the opportunity to teach there in 2007. And I am currently, although you'll see here I am in New York, but I am currently teaching at the Gregorian in Rome, alas, via Zoom. So I am missing the opportunity to eat lots of pasta, although I'm sure that my waistline is all the better for it. But these international outreach programs often play themselves out in unusual ways. And I was caught a little off guard because I didn't think about it. When you mentioned another papal encyclical, Laudato Si. Laudato Si is Pope Francis's environmental encyclical. And through our colleagues in Buenos Aires, where he used to be the Archbishop, we learned that they were doing Jewish Catholic dialogue on Laudato Si to encourage interreligious cooperation to save the planet. And they reached out to us and said, Pope Francis would like it if you did the same in New York. So at Fordham University, a Jesuit university, and here at Jewish Theological Seminary, we got a study group together where we would study Laudato Si. We very quickly realized and invited Muslims to the group and Protestants as well. And one of the great things was when Pope Francis had a gathering in Rome to talk about Laudato Si, our representatives for New York were a Muslim and a Protestant. We sent them on behalf of the Jewish Theological Seminary. So it's not only an opportunity to do dialogue, but quite literally an opportunity to help through our bully pulpits, our literal pulpits in our parishes and synagogues and mosques to save the earth. I've been looking at the questions, and I think we've covered a lot of the questions from the audience, but I'm getting again and again the question to you. Local examples, what are we doing to combat anti-Semitism? How do we continue to reach out to parish priests and frankly, local synagogues? And one question that caught me off guard, it is, have there been any significant setbacks that emerged in the past 60 years which did not help the dialogue process? So I've given you a whole series of questions. You can swing at them as you wish.
Well, obviously, the examples of individuals who have said awful things or suggested awful things, and from the Catholic perspective, our own people, they have damaged the furtherance of our dialogue and our collaboration. But I think if we focus only on things that were said and should not have been said, or positions that were taken, we could end up feeling as though we had made no progress. So yes, there have been things. You asked a question about getting into the local situation. My time, I'm finishing 3 years here as the Archbishop of Washington. 2.5 of those years, I've been in lockdown, or we've all been in lockdown. So I haven't had a chance to do some of the things that I think are my responsibility to have to advance this dialogue on the local level. I can recall when I was the Archbishop of Atlanta, we observe the 40th anniversary of the issuance of Nostra Aetate. And the rabbi at the temple, which is certainly one of the prominent synagogues in the Atlanta area, prior to Peter Berger, who I have great affection and respect for, he and I agreed that we should have some kind of common program to observe the 40th anniversary of the issuance of Nostra Aetate. So what we did was we agreed that we would have a musical evening highlighting Jewish music and Catholic music, and the choirs that would be put together to prepare those songs of praise. He suggested we do it at the Cathedral of Christ the King. I countered and said, no, I suggest we do it in a synagogue, because chances are more Jewish people have been in a Catholic church than Catholics have been in a synagogue. So we went and had the program at the temple. It was magnificent. Both communities came out in great number. The music was extraordinary, but the fellowship was even more important. As after the program, after the musical program, there were cookies and punch and conversation. And I think everybody felt good about each other and about themselves.
I want to read, it's not exactly a question, but it speaks exactly to what you just said. This is a message. It was sent in on the chat, and I'm now getting it on my phone. It says, I am a Catholic priest, originally from Ghana, but now working with the Roman Catholic Diocese of Brooklyn. I would like to remark that on a local level, I was invited by a rabbi for Shabbat dinner. It is an example of Catholic-Jewish dialogue in practice. And then the last line, which really caught my heart, we are watching this event together.
Oh.
So I think that kind of says it all, that this possibility is here and it's real. And I want to underscore that by a request that His Eminence made of me. He asked through his office whether he might have the last word to give a closing meditation or closing prayer. So I want to invite you to give a last word. And then after you speak, I'm going to call on Professor Afterman to have a farewell.
My dear friends, we are about to enter a time in the year when both Jews and Catholics focus in on important religious events that strengthen and encourage us in our faith. As we celebrate them apart from one another, let us also embrace each other as Catholics celebrate Holy Week and Jews celebrate Passover. May we never celebrate in isolation without lifting one another up in prayer and in gratitude that God has fashioned us as His children and loves us as His children and dares us to love one another as brothers and sisters. Amen.
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 Your Eminence, Archbishop Wilton, Cardinal Gregory, I feel that after our lunch at the USCCB a few months ago, and after our sort of lunch here today, because it is a lunch and learn, I want to actually give you a new title. I will always respect you as Your Eminence, but now I want to call you my friend.
Thank you.
I am pleased to call on another friend, Professor Adam Afterman, the director of the John Paul II Center and professor and chair of the Department of Philosophy at Tel Aviv University, for a closing word. Adam, from Jerusalem.
Thank you, Rabbi Vysotsky and Chancellor Schwartz, for hosting this very special event. Thank you, Your Eminence, for a most stimulating and thoughtful talk. As Rabbi Vysotsky mentioned, in our center, we're training future leaders in the field of interreligious dialogue. We believe that such training should include the theological training and the study of the history and meaning of the dialogue in our traditions, providing a solid foundation for its practice in each of our traditions. In addition, we're also developing the practical skills of dialogue needed for young leaders to work in their communities around the world. And currently we have more than 130 graduates worldwide whom we continue to support. Many of them are with us tonight. All of this, including this event today, is sponsored by the Russell Berry Foundation. And I want to thank Angelica Berry, Dr. Idana Goldberg, and Naomi Schenk from the Berry Foundation for sponsoring this event and for the ongoing support of our work. And again, I want to thank all of you, all the people here for joining us today. And we hope to see you next year, hopefully post-COVID era. And shalom from Jerusalem. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Adam. And I want to echo a final amen of thanks to Angelica Berry and our friends at the Berry Foundation. They have been steadfast supporters for many, many years. I want to thank all of you. More than 500 people RSVP'd for this event, and we're very excited. But again, my special thanks to my friend, His Eminence, Cardinal Gregory. Good afternoon, good evening.
God bless.